NSCA stuff. And probably for you people, NSCA is probably the #1 organization that you'd be interested in if you're interested in strength and conditioning. Okay? And probably told you this, but you know, the American College of Sports Medicine is a huge organization and so forth, but they didn't offer a lot of information on strength conditioning. And so then, in exercise science, we have some people that are more strength conditioning, some people that are more aerobic. I'm sort of like both of them, but some people, that's all they do is research in one particular area, like strength conditioning, or some people do more aerobic running kind of stuff. And so you know, you can't do research in all areas or whatever, so some people have better backgrounds in some areas than others. Most of the sports are anaerobic versus aerobic. When you look at the characteristics of most sports there. And the soccer is 50-50, but a lot of them are more anaerobic. Now, so you can be a member. I'm not sure what a student membership costs, but you can get the Journal of Strength Conditioning plus some other materials or whatever.
I think it's like 60.
60?
Per student.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. So if you want to get the best certification that you can in the United States, you want to get the NSCA, National Strength Conditioning Association certification there. In Europe, they've got the European College of Sports Sciences, and they've got some other certifications in strength conditioning in Europe. If we look at Europe versus the U.S. in terms of strength conditioning, Europe is way ahead of the U.S. in terms of strength conditioning, especially the Russian countries and so forth. They do a lot more strength conditioning. You know, you'll never find anybody in the U.S. that's doing Olympic lifts with 10-year-olds just with a bar to learn the technique. You don't see that. But in Turkey and some other places, they're doing a lot of technique, a lot of free weights kind of stuff. And then in the competitions, if you look on the list of the best in the world, you got to go way down the page before you find the U.S. And so, in terms of strength conditioning, and the scientists are really good. They put a bigger priority in Russia and Turkey and some of those countries there. William Sands, he's a big dog in strength conditioning. He started out working with USA Gymnastics, and he's done tons and tons of research. And a friend of mine, Dr. Mike Stone, is at East Tennessee State. He runs the Olympic training program for USA weightlifting. Okay? And so he was at Auburn years ago, and then he was at Appalachian State. He ran the Olympic Training Center. Now he's at East Tennessee State. His background, I believe, is either Scottish or Irish. Okay? Stone, that's a big name in Ireland, or yeah. And so Mike Stone, he measured Meg Stone, who's the first woman strength conditioning coach in the United States. Strength and conditioning coaches sort of married. I don't know why. They like each other. All they talk about is lifting weights, so they got a lot in common. I guess they can only find a few people that they match up well with. But yeah, then Terry Todd and Jan Todd, they run the Strength Conditioning History Museum in Austin, Texas, part of the University of Texas. And one time he was the world's strongest man and she was the world's strongest woman. What a team, right? And so I had lunch with him in Scotland a couple of years ago. He passed away last year, but yeah, a lot of history there. Okay, and so in Austin, Texas, they have a museum that has all the old strength conditioning stuff there. You ever get a chance, it's got all the documents and books and so forth. And so, and Dr. Stowe, we had the National Strength Conditioning Research Center in Auburn when I was I was working here and I worked at Auburn stuff too, but Dr. Stone is like a big old bear, and so if he was teaching his class, he'd have his weight belt on, and so he'd go give him a few reps, and go to class, and then go back and get to the gym or whatever. But if you want to learn strength conditioning, high level science, East Tennessee State. It's the best in the world, in the United States, there to go and train and get a grad assistantship, but they're particular about who they take you in and so forth. But they're doing most of the good research comes out of Dr. Stone's lab or that particular university there. There's some others, a guy named Kramer from UConn, a guy named Fleck, and some others. Scandinavian countries have a lot of good strength conditioning people there. So good researchers in that area. But they developed their own organization, and Sands is one of their leaders there. We're going to look a little bit in there. You can get this publication. I put it on the blackboard, and so you can get it and look at it. But it's got everything you need in terms of a weight training or resistance type of training program. Because if you take their exam, you've got to know the practical part as well as the exercise science part. So we can teach you the exercise science part, but you really need to learn the practical part, like Olympic lifting and periodization programs and stuff like that. You normally don't get just in a classroom. You've got to be out there working with people that are experts in the field there. So they have study materials and they have things to show you how to train and how to spot and all these different lifts and so forth. And so you have to get familiar with all these different things here. So if you're in strength conditioning, get this, start reading it. And pretty recent there. Talking about movement fundamentals, strength conditioning, techniques, program design, training principles, and so forth, biomechanics, and so forth. So it goes into a lot of different areas there. Okay. Warren Epley, he's one of the founders of the organization. There. Talks about principles of training. You should know this. Individuals are different in terms of their responses to strength training conditioning. Specificity, that refers to only the muscles that you train, the ones that get the benefit, right? So if you're going to be a football player, you do specific exercises. If you're a soccer player, you do different exercises. If you're a volleyball player, you do different exercises and so forth, all related to your particular sport. The overload principle is muscles adapt to stress, right? And then what do? We stress them, and then they adapt, right? And so if we look at it in terms of exercise or strength training or whatever, our body likes no stress. What does that mean? It likes to be relaxed, nothing bothering it, and so forth. Then, what do? We stress it, right? And then what does it have to do? Adapt. If it doesn't adapt, you seen any dinosaurs lately? Walking around? What? They couldn't adapt, right? They just couldn't hack it, right? So they didn't make it. And so if you don't adapt, you don't survive. You don't make it. And so the same thing with training or conditioning is the muscle adapts. Now, if we don't stress it enough, it doesn't get a lot out of it, right? If we stress it too much, what happens? It gets injured, it gets hurt. And so we've got to overload it. We've got to work it harder than we ever worked it before. So one example is we used to run 4 miles every single day. We ran it at the same time every day. We never got any better because we stressed the body the same every day. If we wanted to make the body go faster or run faster, we'd have to either maybe shorten the distance but run faster, or lengthen the distance and then try to run the same speed at a longer distance, right? We'd have to overload the system in order for it to adapt to the stress, in order for it to improve. So if you do the same old workout every single day, you're never going to get any better, right? Because you're not overloading the body. You're not stressing the body, because the body adapts to stress, right? And so our goal is, exercise is a stress, right? It's a good stress if it's handled good. It's a bad stress if it's what? Handled bad. So you can be a personal trainer or a coach and you can cause more problems and decrease performance, right? Or you can make the body what? Bigger, stronger, whatever you want to do, make it perform better and improve performance. Depending upon what? How you stress it. I've seen people decrease performance, make them worse, right? With exercise programs. Or you can make them what? Better, right? And so, and so we look at the overload principle, diminished returns, the benefits related to the amount that you do. We can waste a lot of time doing a lot of worthless stuff, but we don't get any benefit from it, right? And so anything you do, it has to be for a reason. Reversibility relates when we quit training, what happens? We get worse, right? And then we got to go back in and reverse it and make it stronger. Progression, we have to have some kind of progression in order to improve performance, right? And so, like I said, if you do the same thing over and over and over again, that's good for maybe fitness, but you never will get you better. Never get you better there. Okay. Energy systems. See, we talked to those energy systems for a reason, right? Not for you to learn the Krebs cycle and all that just because we wanted to talk about it, because the energy systems are related to training and performance there. Okay. So there's the 3 energy systems. You've probably seen this a bunch of times by now, right? And so you've got the aerobic system, fast and slow glycolysis, and the ATP-PC system, based upon how length of time and how hard the intensity of training there. Okay. Program design talks about some things here. Okay. Here we've got alarm, resistance, exhaustion. Now, what happens whenever we start an exercise program? What does the body, how does it react? It doesn't like it, right? And you get what? You get that worse, right? Okay. So, like right now, Jennifer is expecting a baby, right? And how's that baby doing?
He's good. Just hanging out.
I'm not picking on her, but it's in an environment where everything's controlled. The food's controlled, the temperature's controlled, she's taking care of it, she's exercising, she's eating right, everything is going good, right? But then the baby comes out into the world. Then what happens? The environment completely does what? Changes. Then the baby has to do what? Adapt to stress, right? And so what happens to the weight of the baby?
Goes down at first.
And then the baby starts adapting and then growing and developing and getting healthy and so forth, right? So that's sort of the same thing that happens when we start an exercise program. Okay, everything's okay. We start that program. Oh God, I can sore, I can hardly walk up the steps, I don't feel good. And the body has to do what? Adapt, right? Okay. And then we take care of it, we keep doing the right kinds of things, it tends to get better. So here we've got alarm. That would be right when we start the program, right? Our muscles have to react to all that kind of stuff. We get some resistance, and then if we work it too hard, we get exhausted and overtrained, and what happens to performance? It goes down, right? Okay, and that's one of the hard things to figure out in terms of overtraining. You know, how hard you train the athlete, how far do you push them? What do you do with them? If you're like one of these coaches that are so bored with their life, they have nothing else to do, you just work them all day long, every day, just so you have somebody to hang out with, well, that's probably not that good. And I've done that before myself, but that's probably not good. So you need to have a program specifically geared in order to improve performance, or a fitness program, just for the general person. And so we call that Cellier's General Adaptation Syndrome. I don't know how long ago that was, but everybody's heard of a guy named Hans Cellier. He's a psychologist, and he developed this syndrome, and he's got a book called Stress Without Distress. I had to read it back in the 60s, and so it talks about, okay, we want to stress the body, and we want good stress, and good stress is called eustress, and then we have bad stresses. So exercise is a good stress, and we follow this particular principle here. Okay, whenever we develop a program there, this relates to exercise. Okay, so here you see Cellier's adaptation syndrome related to something called periodization. So what is periodization? Don't y'all take a strength conditioning class? Do you? You learn anything, or just a waste of time?
There's a lot of
I could teach that class, right? And so we have microcycles and mesocycles and so forth. Now, who invented this right here? A guy called PHED. Where's he from? Russia. And so Russia has good weightlifters, or did. I don't know what they have now. They got a bunch of people on drugs, I think, now, steroids. But historically, they've had some really good strength athletes. And so we have microcycles. Then, if we did something with periodization, we train our workout every so many weeks or whatever, right? And so based upon when we were trying to meet, or whatever we were trying to accomplish there. Okay. So look at this, we have a microcycle. So if I was going to do strength training, and I had a client, I'd put them on a program, I'd use some lighter weights, I'd do more repetitions to try to increase muscle hypertrophy. So lighter weights, more reps increases what?
muscle size.
Muscle size. Okay. Okay. Lighter weights, more reps increases muscle size and causes muscle hypertrophy. It doesn't increase strength a tremendous amount, but it makes the muscle grow. Then you have more what?
More rigorously.
Yeah, you have a bigger muscle, right? Then if you have a bigger muscle, it's easier to make it stronger, right? So we start doing the lighter weight, more reps. And when I talk about a lot of reps, it may be 12, 15 reps or something like that. Okay? And maybe do like 3-4 sets or whatever. It just depends. It depends how well you train. Like the Olympic weightlifters, they work out all day long, like 5-6 days a week. Okay? And the average person works out maybe 3 days a week for 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps on about 8 to 10 exercises, right? And so like running a marathon. You know, we don't start out running a marathon. We start out what? A few miles and then build up. Same thing with the Olympic weightlifters at the training center. They're doing something all day long related to strength training, technique or form or whatever. They hardly ever max out. Why is that? They don't want to get hurt. You've never seen anybody hurt win the Olympics, right? So if they get injured, it's no good. So they'll do lighter lighter weights that maybe they can do like 400 pounds. Well, they'll do sets of maybe 320 or something like that. Okay, they're not trying to do 430 and see if they can do it or not, because they got a good chance of getting injured, right? So if they're doing something like doing a squat, the glutes are doing most of the work, and then the quads, and then the calves, and so forth. So if one part of the body fails, what does that do? If the glutes fail, it puts all the pressure where? On the quads. Now you got 400 pounds on the quads, and then you just crash. Okay, and so we look at that. So here, you're on a microcycle. Let's say these are the weeks right there, and so first 3 weeks we have them on a microcycle, and then for the next 3 or 4 weeks we decrease the reps and add what? Weight, right? And that tends to make the muscle what? Stronger, right? So then we're making the muscle stronger. Then we go back in, and then for the next cycle we want to make it bigger again. So then we go back in, and then we add what? More repetitions, right? We're still using lighter weights, a little lighter weights, but it's much heavier than it was when we started. And do that for a certain period of time. Then look at week number 12. How's our performance in week number 12 compared to week number 1?
Probably like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah,
bigger.
way higher, right? So that is when we do what? That's our competition, right? So what are we building up for? The big event, right? The competition. That's with strength training or exercise, that's where you want to be good, right? Like when I coach wrestling, we wanted to win the state tournament. Okay, if we wrestled some school or whatever, we would wrestle schools and then we'd stay in practice after the match, because we were working towards what? State championship, right? We wanted to peak at the state championship. And that's really hard for a coach to figure out how much to do and how hard to work them in order to peak. Now, if you overwork them or overtrain them, they're not going to peak at the right time. So if they peak at the first of the season, they win all their games at the first of the season, then they get towards the playoffs and they can't beat anybody, well, it's probably some bad conditioning and some bad training, so forth with the coach there. So in terms of training, if we do the same old thing every single day, we don't improve, right? We peak out. So we have to do some type of progression, some type of periodization. So if you have a client, what do you want to do with a training program? Depending on what they're trying to do. You want to change the volume, right? You're going to change the amount of work they do. You're going to change the sets, reps, and so forth. Otherwise, they'll never get any better. Now, for the adult fitness person, we can do 3 days a week, an hour a day, whatever. And we're trying to prevent with that person, we're trying to maybe improve them, but we're trying to prevent what? Old age and sarcopenia and getting worse and so forth. So it depends on what our goals are in terms of when we train the people there. So that is a periodization model, and then we can go back into the training season. Like all the NBA basketball players, they lift weights, the days of the game and stuff. Okay, and because they want to do what? They want to maintain their strength, right? These guys, these world-class golfers, they do their weightlifting on the morning before they play. Okay, and so that's just part of their normal program. And so, if you have all those gains, you don't want to quit training just because the season's going on, do you? You know, make sure you train during the season, because if you don't train, what's going to happen?
You'll lose it.
You're going to lose whatever gains you did in the off season, right? And so you got to continue to train, you got to continue to work, and you should be on some type of periodization type of program in order to try to peak at the right time. So with y'all's training programs, are y'all on periodization programs? No comment? Huh? I can't hear you. Yeah, you know about the sort of recover a little bit. Yeah. So, progression is important, and periodization is important, and then we look at the volume of work that you do, and that's the total amount of work that you do. Okay, and that's one thing. Now, what they're doing now with a lot of athletes is doing heart rate recovery, HRV stuff, and what that does is it looks at when you're overtrained or overworked, then your nervous system, your blood pressure is higher than it normally is at rest, your heart rate's a little, you lose the variability in the heart rate and so forth. We count beat to beat in terms of heart rates, and that's one way that they're looking at overwork or overtraining. At the University of Alabama, we had a student there, Andrew Flatt. He came from Canada, he stayed with us for a year. Wasn't in school, but just paid his way to hang out in our lab when Dr. Esco was there. And then he went to the University of Alabama and did all their data collection, and he did several studies with swimmers and football team and so forth on HRV. That's all he does, HRV. That's all he cares about. And so now he's at Georgia Southern doing his HRV research stuff there. So if you can figure out what to do to make a peak at the right time, you're able to really do well in terms of coaching and performance. Have you seen teams that were great all year and then all of a sudden they just perform really bad? Yeah. Yeah, and there's other factors involved, but it could be because of their training. So that's periodization. You get into it, read about it, whatever. Okay, so we have strength training. And so if we look at this graph here, repetition max. Okay, for strength, what's the best? Yellow is the best.
Low reps.
Okay. Low repetitions, right? High weight for strength, right? That's not periodization, that's just for strength. Okay. And so if you did 20 repetitions, would that be strength? No. And so 20 reps, remember, strength is the maximum amount of force that you can exert for what?
1 rep.
1 rep. Okay. And so here, for strength, 5 or 6 reps tends to be good if all you're looking at is strength, not hypertrophy or anything else, right? Power, what is power? How do you measure power? What's the definition of power? Should know that. Work divided by what? Time. How fast you can do something, right? So when class is over, if you sprint to the door, that's power, right? Because you want to see how fast you can get out of here, right? So that's power. Okay, and the example I give, okay, I got to cross the street, and that little number's going off in terms of so many seconds left, and this old lady's here, and she's got to see, can I make it? And so what does she need? Power. She's got to make sure she gets before the truck comes by and runs her over, right? So she needs a certain amount of what? Power, right? And so work divided by how fast you can do it. Okay. Now, if we look at a force power curve, power goes up, speed goes what?
Down.
Down, right? Okay. And so if there's no resistance, I'm fast. If I got a 50-pound weight, I'm what? Slow, right? Okay, and so if you're an athlete that needs power, you need to train quickly or do things quickly. Now, if you're an athlete that lifts like this, that's all strength, right? And now if you got an athlete that's got to move like this, that's what? Power, right? And so you train people differently based upon the specificity of their sport there. Now look at hypertrophy. That's increase in what?
Muscle
Muscle
mass.
size. So if you want to wear that tank top and have those big biceps and go flex yourself all over the place, what do you work on?
Hypertrophy.
Hypertrophy, right? So you got pretty muscles, right? And so you get bigger muscles. But does that mean you're necessarily strong?
No.
No. And so bodybuilders, they tend to be strong, but they're not near as strong as Olympic weightlifters are. Okay? And so there's a big difference, in strength there. So we can get bigger muscles. So we do more repetitions, and that makes the muscle grow or bigger. We got hypertrophy, and we also have something called what? Hyperplasia. That's increasing the number of fibers. Does it really exist? We're not sure. And then muscle endurance is what?
How long it can go.
Multiple repetitions, right? Do over and over and over and over again. So if you can do, like 1,000 sit-ups, you got good what?
Endurance.
Muscle endurance. You got really good muscle endurance. You may not have tremendous strength. Strength and endurance are different. Okay? So if we're doing endurance, we're not really training as much as we could for strength, right? Remember, mixed programs give you what? Mixed results, right? Y'all did learn something. That's fine. So, based upon this, then we can do what? Design a program for somebody, right? Depending on what they want to do. Now, the average adult needs what? A little of all of it, right? Okay, average adult. But if you're an athlete, you train according to what? Your sport, right? Or whatever you're trying to accomplish, or whatever you're trying to do with your athlete there. And then within this, we can get into more, much more complicated things there. Stretching and warm up. They've got this big controversy now. What will they tell you about flexibility related to strength? What do they tell you? If you're going to do a 1 rep max, see how strong you are, you shouldn't stretch, right? That's what they tell you, right? So why do they say that? Muscles are like what?
Rubber bands.
Rubber bands or springs, right? Now, if I took a rubber band and I stretch it real hard, what does that do to the elasticity of the rubber band? It loses some of its spring, right? Okay. Our Australian expert, tell me about kangaroos. You never seen one?
Yeah. They're like on TV, they're everywhere.
They're everywhere? Can they jump high?
Yeah.
So, why can they jump so high?
Because they use it to
Okay, well, what about their feet, their legs? Are you Australian? I'm not Australian either. I study kangaroos. So, but what kangaroos have, they've got a long tendon, right? Like their Achilles is really long, and they've got a tremendous spring. Okay, and so remember we showed the muscle, and the muscle is like the spring here. This thing, it contracts and then it expands, right? And then you get ability to jump there. And kangaroos are designed with a tremendous spring. And so that way they can jump really, really high. So if you're a basketball player or a volleyball player, you need a good what? A good spring, right? Okay. And so what they will tell people is don't do static stretching like this and hold it and so forth, because that tends to do what? Stretch, and then that decreases the force a little bit when they do like a jump or run rep max or whatever. So that's static stretching. But the research says if you're going to stretch, do dynamic stretching. What does that mean? Moving stretching, right? Like, okay, that does not decrease the force output like the static stretching does. Okay, so if you ever see anybody says, yeah, you shouldn't stretch before you exercise because that decreases your ability to exercise, well, it does, but for us, it's probably not going to, you know, if we're going to be in the dunking contest, we probably don't want to do like 30 minutes of static stretching before we go out and enter the contest, but for most things, it's probably not going to matter a whole lot there. Most track athletes stretch like an hour before they run the 100 meters or whatever, but a lot of time now they'll do more dynamic stretching than static stretching kinds of things there. So I want you to be aware of some of the research, some of the stuff you read will tell you shouldn't stretch before you exercise. Well, that may be true in certain particular circumstances, but there's other options too. And so, you know, if you think that's decreasing your performance, do what? Dynamic, right? What do golfers do? Dynamic, right? And so they do the dynamic. And we also have something called stretch reflex. What is that? All you exercise physiology people who were in my class, what's a stretch reflex? You stretch something, and then what does the muscle want to do? It doesn't like it. It wants to do what? It recruits more what? Muscle fibers to stretch, go back in the other direction, right? So if you're walking outside and you step off the curb and twist your ankle, what does your foot want to do? Come back. So you recruit what? Muscle fibers. So here, a stretch, recruit more muscle fibers, and then what? Come through, right? Yeah.
Is it the stretch reflex the same thing as the Golgi?
Golgi tendon organ?
Yeah.
Golgi tendon organ.
Oh.
Golgi tendon organ inhibits contraction. And so, it's a good question. If I'm lifting a weight, and my body perceives that weight to be heavier than I can lift, the Golgi tendon organ sends a signal, hey, this is too heavy, don't recruit any muscle fibers, weight comes back down. Okay, so the stretch reflex increases what? The number of muscle fibers that are involved, increases the strength. The Golgi tendon organ does what? Inhibits the contraction, right? It inhibits the amount of force. So what's the Golgi tendon organ trying to do? Prevent injury, right? Your body is trying to take care of you if you listen to it. So you're trying to prevent an injury. So the Golgi tendon organ fires, and then the body adapts to the Golgi tendon organ. And so if I've got a weight here, and let's say I'm trying to lift like 250, and I push, and all of a sudden it starts coming back down. And so that's because the Golgi tendon organ perceives that weight to be too heavy. Now, as you train, you override the Golgi tendon organ. And they've had people that do arm wrestling contests and just break their arm in half. They exert so much force, the Golgi tendon organ doesn't come in and slow them down, and then the force is so strong it just breaks their bone. Y'all ever seen that? It just cracks the bone. Okay, because the strength is so so much, it just overrides the Golgi tendon organ there. So when we train, we adapt and override our protective mechanisms sometimes, like the Golgi tendon organ. So that's a good question. So what else you got about strength training? I think y'all about brain dead, I think, huh? Okay, what's holidays Sunday? Valentine's Day. Okay. So y'all have a good Valentine's Day. Huh? And I taught like junior high, man. I got all kind of Valentine cards. I don't get any cards anymore. Okay, Alex, you gonna check it out for us? Go check out Faulkner for us? Let us know. Find out what programs they got. They got PT or OT or when the programs are coming up open and who can apply and so forth. Okay. Okay. Well, you just call their office or whatever.
Dr. Woods, I have a question about the last quiz. I was looking back at the and I think for like number 8, there's one about the calories. I put 250 calories, but I guess the case is 50 or 250. Like when I put 350.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out what was the question?
It was the one about the person was working out and they had X amount of net and it was asking for the calorie expenditure.
Mhm.
So I put 250 calories, but the answer was 250.
Okay. So the
So I guess it was case.
yeah, case system. Okay.